Yep, that's right. I have indeed played F1 25 My Team Career Mode. Behind closed doors, I got invited recently at the start of this week to play it at the Codemasters HQ in Birmingham and was met with a presentation and then played F1 25 for basically 3 hours, split over 1 hour for my team, 1 hour for general driving and time trial modes, and then 1 hour of breaking points. So over the next coming weeks, I'll be talking through my team today, next week general gameplay, handling and improvements to the game, and then the third week will be all about breaking points. So in this video, I'll first talk over all the points and the new features and changes coming to my team 2.0, and then after addressing my two main key areas of concern and skepticism, as I've alluded to before in recent videos, which were driver transfers and AI. I think that if those things aren't solved, then really none of the new features on show really matter, and I will be addressing those two things because those were immediately things that I was bringing up and questioning the devs that I got to speak to on this day playing F1 25 behind closed doors. And finally, also, I'll be going through things that I think they kind of missed out and would have been cool to see in this revamp, and things that I definitely think they should be looking to put into immediately for the next F1 game title. I know F1 25 has not even come out yet, but that's just how my brain works. I'm always thinking about the kind of next thing of how we can make it even better. And then at the end, I'll be summing up with a conclusion. But let's just say right now, off the bat, I am still skeptical, but I'm optimistic for what F1 25 could be. But there is still an air of skepticism about really truly testing the things that I think mattered the most, and those are still some question marks that need to be answered in the coming weeks when we maybe get more hands-on with a preview build in May. Because let's be real, 1 hour for my team is really nothing. I couldn't even do a full 50% race, let alone even a full 5-lap race, basically. So I haven't really tested out everything I wanted to, but time was very limited. Like I said, we're going to kick things off then in this video with the actual improvements and new features coming to my team 2.0 in F1 25. And I'm going to start off with the nature of what my team is in F1 25 and potentially beyond, as it was a big question mark from the initial reveal. There was, the wording about managing 2 drivers. I can confirm now that in my team career mode, you will just play as the owner of your custom F1 team, and you will be managing 2 real drivers and driving as either every single race. Like every single race, you will get the choice of which driver you drive as, but you will not be able to implant your own avatar and character into that team. Instead, that avatar will be present, but just as an owner. So being completely honest, I still will need to see how I feel about this after a few seasons in the game, but I have to be completely honest, my gut feeling is it's a shame that we can't have ourselves in the car. Because personally, for me, I'm going to feel initially quite disconnected with the game mode, because you lose that sense of, okay, it's me in the car, rather than, oh, I'm driving as this F2 driver or this icon or whatever. You lose that through line of, why the stakes matter for you is because you're trying to win the championship personally, whereas now it's going to be about you wanting to win, well, the constructors for you as the team owner, and then I guess you're going to have to try and, I guess you'll end up picking drivers that you care about and that you want to win the championship for them. At the same time, I feel like you also lose the customization of like the helmet and the race number for your driver in my team career mode. But at the same time, which was a valid point brought up to me by the devs, is you actually gain more gameplay as well, though, having 2 drivers, because you now have 2 sets of contracts to negotiate and work with. And also the new R&D system, which I'll get to in a minute, lends itself better to having to manage both drivers, and you'll see why. But the story in your career mode will be very different to others, I guess, because you will have totally 2 different drivers, but it certainly is going to take a fair bit of time to get used to. Like, I think I'm gonna have to pass my judgment completely on this new way to do my team after a couple of seasons, because who knows, maybe I'll end up enjoying the storylines I can create with having 2 real drivers. But my initial gut reaction still was just, it's a shame. I would love to still be put into the cockpit. But anyway, let's overall talk about the overhaul to my team 2.0. I was coming in wanting big changes to the UI, the way the menu structure works, just to give it a big refresh. And a refresh we have got, because it's an all new look and menu system. You're now met with 3 distinct areas to manage as the team owner. You've got engineering, you've got personnel, and corporate, and within those there are split off different things you can do. We've got a new activity timeline also, which looks a lot more detailed, so you can now choose activities to do simultaneously depending on the department it falls under, which is definitely more realistic. Like, the engineering department shouldn't rely on what the personnel department is doing or the corporate department all the time, and there should be a bit of overlap as there would be in a real company, a real F1 team. So now the activity timeline is a lot more intricate to allow more management of the different activities you're doing and trying to balance each department area. Let's talk about R&D, because this now is totally different. R&D falls under the engineering category in the menu now, and R&D is now very much split into research and development. So now you not only have to spend money on researching parts, you then have to actually develop, or a better word to use, I think, is manufacture those parts. So you're spending money on both those things in the supply chain of your upgrades, basically. And because now you're worrying about actually the manufacturing process of the upgrades, you have a choice to make. Do you choose to make one at a time and give priority of the first one being made to your number one driver, or do you choose to make them at the same time, but overall that will take longer, if you know what I mean? So we see this in real life. Sometimes a new design is made for the team and the top dog driver gets the part first, at the first Grand Prix of the European portion of the season, and then a race later both cars have the design, because like in reality now in the game, it takes time to manufacture these parts. So sometimes you have to maybe prioritize, okay, we can make one of them now for this weekend and it will go to one driver, or if you really want to give equal opportunity, we can make both at the same time, but it will take longer. Both will not be done for this weekend and it will come to the next one. So you have that choice to make, and again, that will now play into the morale and the perspective your drivers have of you and your team. If you're giving constant upgrades to one driver, the other one is not going to perceive you very well, maybe, and their morale may drop, and vice versa. The other one will get really loyal and get really perceive your team in a good way because you're giving him the better treatment. That will also then affect contract negotiations, which brings me very nicely to the next part, which is personnel. So personnel has a new contract system area for the drivers. So now you have to opt to negotiate with multiple drivers by approaching them before the contract period. So there's a nice screen where you can basically it's almost like scouting in a way, where you kind of, you tell your personnel department, I want to approach this driver, this driver, this driver, and then you've got them all lined up and ready, and then you're going to try and approach them into the contract window and go into the bargaining. But by taking your time to meet multiple drivers face to face to discuss terms, and you actually have like cutscenes where you're going into these meetings, and that's building on the kind of cutscenes we saw in 24 driver career mode. They're now in my team, but you can do that multiple times over with all your different drivers you're trying to pursue. And by taking the time to meet them face to face, you can figure out the best lineup for your future. But you have to be careful, because news of these conversations could leak to other drivers. So that will maybe be disaster for your prospects, because some of them may not like the fact you're talking to someone else. They want to be the only guy you're talking to. So you need to be worried about that leaking out. So it's a fine balancing act of, you could go ahead and talk to 4 drivers at the same time, but then you maybe leave yourself open to maybe losing out on 3 of them because 3 of them get insulted. But personnel doesn't just cover your drivers. Now it covers your workforce. Yes. Finally, there is going to be some acknowledgement of, if you're a team owner, you've got to worry about the staff. You've got to worry about that. And now you have to balance the books for how many staff you have in different departments. So all the money you spend on the staff, the R&D, etc., drivers, all of that now will fall under the cost gap. So we finally have to worry about the cost gap, and you can't just spend whatever you want. In past My Team career modes, I've been at season 5 and we've had like 20, 30 million just sitting there. We're not even spending it. Now you're actually having to spend all that money because you're actually having to account for staff salary and getting staff in. As you grow your team, as you upgrade these different areas of your facilities, that comes with the opening opportunity to bring in more staff, but that also costs money. So it's also going to allow you to downscale your team if times get tough. Like if you have a bad run, and rather than just having a comical shut down facility button like there was in previous My Team career modes, now there's more of a fluid nature where you can just reduce the size of maybe one department, still keep some staff there. So you not just shut it down, but you very heavily reduce the cost. Obviously, if you do that, then the parts you're making with that department will take a lot longer, or whatever you're doing with that department will take a lot longer or take some sort of effect hit. So with that, there are real costs to growing your team, or if they don't grow, and there's an actual need for the money you're earning, basically, because now it's all monetary rather than just kind of wish-washy, made-up R&D point system. It's all tied in with money, the staff, and the upgrades as well. And that's also why it's going to be really important about the money you earn through sponsors in the game with the general racing as well. So speaking about the finances, this will now be seen in the new corporate tab. So corporate was an option already in My Team before, but now it's a all-new look tab where you'll need to make sure you're actually analyzing the chart to make sure you're not going to go, you know, just up and past the cost cap, basically, because you'll notice if your line is going way too close. And obviously that's the last thing you want to do, because then you won't be able to spend any more money for the rest of the season. So you need to make sure that you can spread your costs wisely over the season now. The corporate tab also has the now confirmed new Decal editor, but unfortunately I am only allowed to tell you more and show you more from what I filmed in my behind closed doors visit next week after the deep dive about general improvements, because I guess the Decal editor is so core to even the general game itself, because it will also be available in other parts of the game, not just My Team, that they're wanting to wait for that. So unfortunately that will be, I'll have to wait till next week, but at least I can confirm to you in this video that my hunch and our hunches were correct, that there is going to be a new Decal editor. What I can say, hopefully get away with it, is that you will be able to sign a title sponsor. You kind of already had that anyway in My Team before. You know, you had that initial sponsor. That was the primary sponsor. But now they're kind of touting it as an actual title sponsor because it has a lot more depth to it, because there's now a new screen where there are a load of new perks that you can unlock as you play the game, as you play career mode with this sponsor. And those things could be like logo variants. It could be even whole liveries based on that sponsor. So for the first time, especially console players, you know, you're going to want to think about what sponsor you're choosing, because, you know, you might end up with a really cool looking livery if you are with that sponsor for a long time and you get all the unlocks, and you could get some cool variants of their logos to use on your car. And overall, whilst you do everything here from the upgrades, sorting contracts, etc., you're earning XP as a team owner. So I should have maybe said this at the very start. Obviously, the team owner is a character that you can customize. There are options to choose from of, you know, what kind of look you want for your character. You give them a name, obviously, and everything like that, and that's your avatar. So you as an owner are earning XP. You have your own little, you know, vista window where you're in your office, and you can use that XP to unlock future training points to tailor your personal management style. So there are different perks. Basically, it's going to be a way of rejigging the perk system, or like some of the facility perks, where you can try and speed up things, or you can get better morale, I guess, and better, you know, negotiations or whatnot, basically, with these XP unlocks with the training system of your own, you know, owner. And finally, when it comes to improvements and new features, there is now the new fan rating, which I got to look at now, which is a new thing for this year. It's almost like a new acclaim system, you know, from the previous My Team mode. But it's also got some crossover from the driver accolades we saw in F1 24. They're now coming across, but for the team. So you can earn accolades as a team, and that will boost up your fan rating. And there's also further boosting by beating rivals. You can then boost your fan rating. And as your fan rating progresses, you'll gain ongoing perks to make your team more effective, unlocking the possibility of signing new lucrative title sponsors. So the better title sponsors, the ones that pay more, you're going to need better fan rating for that kind of stuff. And again, like with the owner perks, you also get more perks as just a team. So there's kind of different tiers and different levels of perks you'll get from as an owner, and then as the actual team fan rating going up. And also, if you have a bigger fan rating, you'll also find maybe signing the better rated drivers, more prestigious drivers, will come easier. And one thing that I think is good is you can also see the fan rating of all the other teams. So this was something that you could see way back in like F1 2010. They used to do this where you could kind of see how you are perceived to other F1 teams. So in this kind of same way, now you can see how your team is perceived in the world of Formula One compared to other teams. So I'm quite curious to see in future seasons, could that play into explaining why, you know, certain teams are signing better drivers or doing better, you know, with money or whatever, and you could see, oh, their fan ratings way up. And then if they're not doing so well, you know, we've seen before some teams just randomly drop off after playing seasons of career mode, and maybe that means their fan rating will drop off. So I think I've pretty much covered all the news and the new features and stuff in My Team 2.0. But as I said at the very top of this video, none of these features actually really matter, you know, a couple of seasons playing My Team career mode if two things aren't solved, which were one, driver transfers, and two, the AI raceability. So about driver transfers, obviously going into this game reveal, I have been very critical about the driver transfers we saw in driver career mode in F1 24. And behind closed doors at this event, this was one of the first questions I asked when I had the opportunity to just have an open chat with the developers, and specifically with Lee Mather, the kind of head of everything they do at Codemasters with F1. And I was able to not only verbally, but also then visually confirm in the game, there is now a toggle for driver move volatility, essentially. You can now toggle, I think it's 3 different levels of volatility, and actually 4 if you count off. So you can have driver transfers off, then you go through 3 different kind of stages of driver transfer volatility. The one at the very end being they're going to try and encourage it as much as you can. The middle one kind of being realistic ones and hopefully still having good transfers. And then the kind of one, you know, in between that and off is they'll be reduced. You're not getting as many driver transfers. And this, I am happy to say, is good news. This is good news. This is a step into the right direction, because if you go back to certain videos, you'll know this, that I actually word for word said that I wanted this very feature. I literally talked about having a toggle. It's in the same menu as the toggles for cash rates and like R&D rates with you, the player, and the AI. I always spoke about give us another slider option for transfers so that at least you can try and encourage more transfers in the base game. And thankfully, they have listened. They've put that in. It's a massive step in the right direction. Obviously, needs to be tested. Time will tell if this is genuinely going to improve things. But the fact that that's an option is very encouraging to me. Now, obviously, in an ideal world, I still maintain now F1 Manager has shown that there's no red tape with FOM. I, for one, believe there should be in the future of an EA F1 game the opportunity to do the transfers manually and change the roster season to season. But as a starting point, this is fantastic. So this was a big thumbs up. I was very worried and I was very surprised to confirm that this was going to be a feature in the game. And on top of that, another thing that I think will help encourage good transfers, interesting transfers maybe, is now finally icons in My Team career mode will be allowed to be signed by AI teams. So finally, those icons of legends of the sport or recent retirees or some of the F2 or F3 icons, the new ones coming in, those can be signed by AI teams now. There were so many times where in previous career modes, like F1 2021 My Team, where, you know, I had like Jenson Button, for example, in my team, and I would have loved to the AI teams to have signed someone like Mark Webber or anything like that. And obviously, you guys know I actually made that happen with mods, but now you can make it happen natively in the game. So console players, you can do that kind of stuff. And obviously, anyway, you know, that kind of thing was stopped recently with mods. So now we need these tools in the game to allow them. And more than that, icons can be customized. So you can specifically opt in which icons you want available in the driver market. So you can basically take out legends of the sport if you want to keep it more realistic, like ish, and you don't want like an Ayrton Senna and Michael Schumacher coming into the grid, and you want to keep a sense of somewhat realism of drivers that would, you know, still be maybe fit and ready to enter the cockpit, basically. You can then choose specifically, you know, which icons you want to allow AI teams to be signed and like allowed in the driver market, basically. And those also include, by the way, you can also now put Breaking Point characters and the F1 movie. The Apex GP drivers starring the F1 movie later this year, we know they're going to be in the game in, you know, some sort of scenario mode. And also now you'll actually be able to play as Apex GP in your own My Team save, and Breaking Point as well. We know you can bring Breaking Point and make your own My Team save. You can also now, we know, bring the F1 movie team and make your own My Team with the F1 movie team. But those drivers are also available in the driver market, so giving you a couple more drivers to work with, basically. So that all in tandem with the toggle, I hope, is going to be a much better situation for F1 25. So now that brings me on to the second big thing that I was skeptical about, and that's the AI. And I will say this right now. I had, as I said, very limited testing. In an ideal world, I could have done, you know, maybe 1 or 2 50% races over the course of the day, but I did not have that opportunity. Like I said, I had 1 hour with my team, which allowed me to, once I got past all the menu options, I could eventually get to the first race and just do a couple of laps, but that was it, basically. And then when I tested Breaking Point, it was the same sort of thing, only a couple of laps there. So I've had very limited testing here, so that would be my preface, that I still need to do more testing in the May preview build, where I actually will have the time to sink in a 50% race. But when I did test them, I tried to test them with going to the inside very obviously to try and see if the AI would move across aggressively, more aggressively than they did do in F1 24 and more like they did in previous F1 games. I am happy to report that it did seem like they were moving more aggressively to the inside to cover it off, so I had to constantly go to the outside then, or I had to really catch them you know, off guard with a lot of battery use to get down the inside. And generally they were driving more lifelike in that kind of way versus the player. But with the AI, I really couldn't tell. There was a cool moment in, I think, the short race I did in the My Team play, where right at the end, it was like a photo finish where 2 AI cars were racing each other right to the line. That was quite surprising. I was genuinely very surprised by that, and that's promising, but I want to see more of that lap after lap from the AI. So I still wasn't sure on that, but from the tiny limited testing, there were some good signs. At the same time, I will say the caveat is, I still think, and speaking to other creators about this, is, you know, agreeing on the same point, is when you're battling AI, from what we played, they still seemed very solid as a car. Like, and what I mean by that is when you go down the inside, and let's say they do turn in a bit aggressively and you're banging tires a little bit and you knock a bit, the player car always seems very unstable. Like, you have to kind of, you get a bit of a tank slapper maybe, or you're you know, wobbling about, whatever. The AI still seemed like an F1 24, almost like a movable object. Very solid still and a bit too stable. I would like to see them still lose a bit more grip when they are tapped a little bit and there is a little bit more movement and just honestly just more player-like, you know, mistakes, you know, than we saw in F1 24, and kind of going back to what we saw in F1 23, where there were quite a decent amount of like lockups or little half spins or full spins even. So because my testing was limited, I had to go off on then just actually asking questions directly to Lee Mather. So I had a somewhat lengthy discussion with him about what they've been doing. So He mentioned to me that they have been testing with the esports build, the F1 sim racing. In that build, they played around with altering the figures for dirty air and slipstream to try and get some data and learn about what that does car to car, and something they're trying to implement for the build we played, but will probably be more present then and more refined in the build we get later in May. I think it may be present in the beta test, but I think the build that we played at Codemasters was way ahead of the beta, I believe, and then the May preview build will be ahead of that. But obviously, that is just word of mouth. It's something that 100% I will personally cannot test for in the 3 hours we did, so I will have to wait till May to really test that out. Personally, I still get the sense that the AI aren't fully as good as they were with F1 23, and I personally, my opinion is, I think we need to revert back to the old ERS system. I think stop the player, stop the AI changing the ERS modes. I think simplify it and go back to what we had with F1 23, where it was just a one mode for the entire race. You could override it with overtake mode, but that was about it. Because I think, with major handling changes aside, I think a big part of why we see these trains is because the ERS is too complex for the AI to navigate it properly. And also, versus the player, you always end up chasing the AI with how much battery they seemingly still have versus you. So that's my 2 cents on the matter. But obviously, I don't know. Maybe they have tried to solve that a little bit, and it's a case of I need to test it more. But at this stage, I have to say I am inconclusive on if they have improved the AI sufficiently enough for me to stamp my sort of it's a fun game to play for seasons to come still. So that is very inconclusive yet. And so for that reason, I am still massively skeptical about the AI racing. I can happily say I'm optimistic, and I'm actually glad with what they've done with the transfers, and my worries are kind of alleviated for now. We'll see how it goes over the long term. But for AI, I still need a lot of convincing before I can, say, oh, okay, I think we're at a good point now. So that will come in May, I guess, when I can actually do a lot more testing with the preview build. But from what I played, now it was very hard to tell. So now let's talk about missed opportunities, things that I was maybe a little bit disappointed that weren't included in the My Team revamp, things I definitely would love to see in the future. I think they missed a huge opportunity to do the ability to move to another F1 team. That is not in the game. You have to stay managing your team the entire My Team save. I think especially now that you're an actual manager / team principal, it makes so much more sense to be able to move teams and manage Ferrari, let's say, after a couple of seasons and go up against your own team like they do in F1 Manager. I mean, they've got the option to add Breaking Point and Apex GP into the game, and in driver career mode, you can actually drive as one of the official F1 teams and still have an 11th team on the grid of Breaking Point, Connor Sport, or Apex GP from F1 Movie. So the mechanics are kind of there for you to have this other 11th team, but you driving or, be associated with one of the official teams. So why not have that in My Team, basically? I think that's the next logical step now, especially now, they've established this thing about you being just a manager, just an owner. I think it's a no-brainer to then allow you to manage other teams, because now you don't have that awkward conversation of, oh, that's a bit odd. You started your own team and you're driving for it, and now you're going to drive for an enemy, but you still own the other team. Now it could just be a case of you're a team principal and you sell your shares in your team or whatever, and you go and manage another team, basically, an official team. Another thing that I think they missed off was with F1 2026 being the next season, IRL. So season 2 in this career mode that we'll be playing in F1 25, I think another major thing that they've missed out is building your own engine. I really had hoped that that was going to be a thing in F1 25, and maybe still might be a thing in F1 26. Because I do think there's a lot of good gameplay to be done with building your own engine, because I think it would make a lot of sense also with the context of going into next year. Teams like Red Bull are making their own engine. Obviously, all the manufacturers like Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, they're all making their own engines. Honda partnering with Aston, making their own engine. I think it would make a lot of sense, but unfortunately, that is not in the game. I think that would still be a cool thing to do. And then also, like I said, at the very top of the new features thing, I still think it would be cool to have your own player, your own avatar in the team. I hope maybe in the future they're open to adding that back in, because I think you will lose a bit of connection there ultimately in the long run, not having your own avatar in there. So, my conclusion to all of this: overall, I am one, satisfied that they addressed the driver transfer issue. That toggle, as I said, is word for word what I've asked for in the past. So I'm happy that I've been heard. And I like, I'm not trying to blow smoke up my own ass, but I like to think, hopefully, speaking that into existence and someone was able to see it, and enough of you guys were complaining on socials and whatever over the last year or so, we made that happen basically. But it will, obviously in a perfect world, I would still love them to add that F1 manager style system where you have native tools to change the roster season to season and change the calendar season to season. I haven't forgotten about that. There's been no mention of calendar customization. F1 Manager has shown there is no FOM red tape, so I really hope that that is something they'll consider adding into the EA F1 game. And speaking to some people at this preview event in the HQ from the team, it seems like they looked at that update from F1 Manager, and maybe that opened their eyes a little bit to what could actually be possible, in the future. So I have some hopes there. But if the toggle doesn't work as I think it should, i.e. getting a good minimum of, 5 transfers a season, some exciting things, I will come back and call them out. At this stage, you have to just go off what we've been told and shown, which is there is a toggle. That's good. Let's see how it works in practice. But that's good that they addressed it and that's a thing. Let's now actually see it work in reality, and then we can come back to it and say if it actually was a job well done. As for the AI, that's going to come with time. As I said, I still think there is a major bit of skepticism here about the AI, especially because also, again, I think not enough people are talking about it. Like I've got nothing against my fellow creators that I was with at this preview event, but I was still hearing so much chat about handling and hardly anyone talking about AI. So it seems like I'm going to be the only one really fighting for the AI, for the game, because it seems like most of my other creators are, moving towards just playing more and more online stuff, which is fine for them. But for me, and for so many of you that watch me, we all care about single player. We are single player players. I love playing single player story modes in other games and going through a story. And that's the same way with F1. I like making my own story and playing that story in the F1 game. And so I will remain pressing Cody's and EA about the AI. And come the preview build in May, I'll be testing that thoroughly. And I will be leaving no scrutiny if I don't see physical evidence of the AI getting better. There was some good notions about they are looking to improve stuff. It's just a case of let's wait and see what comes, and let's see if those improvements come into fruition. But aside from that, when it comes to the new features, there is genuinely a lot to actually go through. That was a big section of this video. There's a lot of features. It's a very thorough refresh. Unlike F1 24's driver career mode, a lot of the changes, you will actually play a lot of it constantly. Like with driver career mode last year, after 2 seasons, none of the new features mattered, and what you were left with was just the base game, the driving. Whereas with my team, all of these features you'll never get rid of. You'll always constantly have to go through the management of parts, research, manufacturing, all the different departments or whatever. So there's going to be a lot there to go through constantly. But again, it's just a case of when I'm 4 seasons in and the shine has worn off, do those systems still work well? And then also, are the AI fun to race in tandem? Are we getting good transfers? So there is a lot of stuff there. I would say I am skeptically optimistic in terms of there's a lot of good stuff there that could lay the foundations for a good, solid My Team that is going to be just as fun to play as F1 2020 and 2021 was. But I ultimately still need to be convinced about the AI. And for the transfers, kudos. Let's see, hopefully, if they actually work as I'm hoping they will with that menu toggle. So that's where we are with F1 25 My Team career mode. I didn't really talk too much about the actual deep dive video itself, but you guys would have seen gameplay from the deep dive video, you know, over the top here. But because I had gone and physically played the game, I just thought it'd be better for me to just sit down here and talk about my experience with the game rather than what they were telling us from the deep dive or articles or whatever like that. So yeah, guys, if you have enjoyed the video, you found it informative, you know, and useful to get a better picture of F1 25 My Team, then do let me know in the comments below. Be sure to hit the like button, please. And if you're new around here, do get subscribed for weekly Formula 1 content. I'll catch you guys around. Goodbye.